Every year, Gallup surveys workers around the world and asks a simple question. Do you actually care about what happens at your job? Not, are you showing up? Are you engaged, interested, invested? In Europe, 13% said yes. 13. The other 87% come to work, do something, go home, and feel nothing in particular. No interest, no drive, no desire to do anything beyond the bare minimum. France, 8%. Switzerland, 8. Spain, 9. Germany, 12, which is actually their all-time low. For 5 years running, Europe has ranked dead last among all regions in the world, behind Africa, behind the Middle East, behind Southeast Asia. And here's what makes this genuinely fascinating. This is the continent with the best labour laws on the planet, the strongest social safety nets, unprecedented worker protections, generous vacation, parental leave, early retirement. By every measurable standard, European workers have it better than almost anyone. And they're the least engaged people on earth. But they're not miserable. That's the twist. Europeans report some of the lowest stress, anger, and loneliness levels globally. They're mostly happy with their work-life balance. They're not suffering. They're fine. They just don't care. Anyone who's spent time in both Europe and, say, Dubai or Tokyo feels this immediately. You walk into a restaurant or a shop, and there's something different in the air. It's not hostility, it's absence. The person serving you isn't rude, they're just not there, not mentally. And that same energy, that polite indifference, runs way beyond service jobs. The accountant finishes exactly what was asked and not one step further. Not because they can't, because they genuinely don't see why they should. The engineer closes a task without wondering what it's for or what comes next. That's not my responsibility gets said so often in European companies that nobody even notices it anymore. Someone sees a problem, knows the fix, and still doesn't act. Not out of spite, out of a deep, quiet conviction that going beyond your contract isn't conscientiousness, it's foolishness. And then there's how people handle criticism. In American work culture, feedback is just part of the process, even harsh feedback. People take it, adjust, move on. In Asian companies, a correction from a senior is a signal to improve. In Europe, something different happens. The person doesn't argue, doesn't push back. They get hurt. They go quiet, pull back, start working even more formally, as if you didn't say, redo this report, but you're worthless. There's another thing worth noticing. A lot of European workers don't just not care about how they work today, they don't care about where they'll be in 5 years. Ask an American that question and they'll lay out a plan. Ask someone in Asia and they'll tell you what they want to learn. Ask the average European employee and you get a blank look. Not because they lack ability, because the very idea of deliberately striving for something feels strange to them. So what's behind this? Because it's clearly not laziness. A lazy person wants to lie on a couch. Europeans are active. They exercise, travel, read, have rich social lives. They're not lazy. They just treat work as a tax on life, not as part of life, as a deduction from it. The roots go deep, not into party politics or voting habits, into something more fundamental, into a worldview that's been absorbed over decades. This idea that labor, by its nature, is exploitation, that the employer, by default, takes more than they give, that a truly fair society should aim for people to work as little as possible. The 4-day work week, early retirement, France's 35-hour maximum, the legal right to disconnect from work email after 6 p.m. All of it grows from the same root. Work is a burden, and civilization's job is to gradually free people from it. Compare that to America, where work is still part of your identity. You meet someone, the first question is, what do you do? In Japan, work is duty and craft. A chef who spent 30 years perfecting one type of noodle isn't seen as someone stuck in a rut. He's a master. His work commands respect, not sympathy. In Europe, work is what you do from 9 to 5 so that your real life can begin afterward. And when an entire culture shares that attitude, broadcasting it at every level, trying hard at work starts to feel weird. The person who's passionate about their job. In an American office, they're a role model. In a European one, they're the oddball who doesn't know how to set priorities, or the overachiever making everyone else look bad. Every system has a side effect. It attracts the people it's designed for. America built a system where you can earn a fortune or end up with nothing. And that filter pulls in people who are willing to make that trade. Indian engineers, Chinese entrepreneurs, Israeli founders, people with appetite for risk and a willingness to grind. Not everyone who comes, obviously, but the filter works. Europe built a different system. Strong social state, guarantees, protection, support. And it filters too, just by a different principle. The person who wants to risk and build is more likely to go to America, to the Gulf, to Singapore. The person who values stability and safety chooses Europe. Among the people who've moved to Europe over the last few decades, there's enormous talent and energy. Doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs, building businesses and creating jobs. But there's also another group. People for whom the European safety net itself was the improvement. Not bad people, just people for whom the system's signal of, we'll take care of you, was the main reason to come. And once inside, there's no strong incentive to leave that care. There's a well-known observation. Where it's clean, nobody litters. But the moment one person spits on the sidewalk, within a week, the whole block is dirty. The reverse is also true. Where everyone litters, even a tidy person eventually gives up looking for a trash can. The workplace runs on the same mechanism. Someone arrives in Europe with energy, with a habit of working for results, ready to go above and beyond. And they land in an environment where everyone around them does the minimum, where staying late is considered odd, where suggesting an improvement feels like breaking the rules, where enthusiasm earns you not respect, but mild irritation from colleagues. A year or two later, that person behaves exactly the same way, not because they changed, because the environment is stronger than any individual intention. The ones who resist this pressure usually leave or build something of their own, setting their own rules. Everyone else adapts, which in practice means they stop trying, and the culture becomes even more uniform. There's a number that captures this perfectly. 97% of German managers consider themselves good leaders. 69% of their direct reports disagree. And 60% of those managers have never had any training in how to actually work with people. Between the boss and the employee, separated by a wall of formal rules, there's no real connection. No genuine feedback, no sense that anyone cares about what you're doing or how you're growing. The Dutch sociologist Geert Hofstede spent decades putting cultural differences into numbers. Willingness to accept inequality. Austria scores 11 out of 100. Denmark, 18. Someone who grew up in that culture and then finds themselves in a position of you serve, I'm served, they experience that completely differently than someone from Manila. Drive toward achievement. Norway scores 8, Sweden 5. A society that doesn't particularly value striving naturally reproduces indifference toward results. Harvard Business Review compared what employees on each side of the Atlantic say matters most. Americans named purpose, caring, and results. Europeans named safety, order, and enjoyment. None of this is a moral judgment. It's a system producing exactly what it was designed to produce. Gallup calculated the global cost of disengagement at $8.9 trillion a year. That's not a European number, that's worldwide. But Europe, with its 13% engagement, is contributing more than its share. And no European country likes to discuss this. The topic instantly turns political. Someone says immigration, and the conversation becomes about racism. Someone says work ethic, and they're accused of not understanding work-life balance. But if you strip out the ideology and just ask a simple question, what incentives does this system create, and what behavior does it reward? The picture is clear. Europe built a system that attracts people who value security and pushes away people who value opportunity. That's not a flaw in the system. That is the system. A culture where it's awkward to admit you enjoy your work will inevitably produce indifference. And no legislation, no matter how progressive, will fix that. The fix, if there is one, is cultural, not legal. Stop treating interest in work as something suspicious. Stop looking at someone who loves what they do as if they missed the memo about life. Hire for attitude, not just skills, because you can teach technique, but you can't teach someone to want to think. Give people boundaries, not scripts, and let them figure out the rest. And maybe the most important thing, give every role dignity. The Japanese model proves it's possible. A free, democratic society with independent courts and strong rights. And the chef making noodles for 30 years is respected, not pitied. That gap between what a society tells you about equality and what your daily work tells you about your place in it, that's where disengagement lives. And until Europe closes it, the numbers won't change. That's it for today. I'm Mike Torchinsky. Thanks for spending these minutes with me. If this one made you see something differently, or if you know someone managing teams in Europe who's been feeling this exact frustration, send it their way. Might start a conversation worth having. And if you haven't yet, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Until next time, take care.